Hey guys, in this tutorial we're going to create these two iOS UI screens in Adobe XD. I also want to remind you that I recently launched an Adobe XD course, so feel free to check it out in the link in the description if you're interested in going from zero to hero with this software. But now let's jump right into it. So we just opened Adobe XD, and the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to select the very first option, which is selected by default, and let's open up this new Adobe XD file. I'm going to resize the window just a bit, and now we can actually go and start by renaming the dashboard, and we're going to add some text. So over here we're going to have BTC and USD. And for this specific crypto app, we're going to use Montserrat, which by the way is a free Google web font, so you can download it for free directly from the Google website. And we're going to go with a semi-bold version of this text, since we want to give it quite a bit of a visual emphasis. One thing that I like to do is to actually add sort of a blue tint to the text, so it's still dark but with just a little bit of blue in it, and I think this is working well so far. Maybe let's just make it 2 points bigger. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create the value which we're going to have on the top. So this is going to be 72,000 USD, and we're going to duplicate this by using Option Alt key and the left mouse button. So as you can see, you can easily just duplicate things in both Adobe XD and also other softwares. So let's go over here. Let's change this one to USD. We're probably going to change the color, but for the time being, let's just leave it as this. So let's go ahead over here, let's use the comma, and let's add 2 more values to the number, and let's left line this. We're going to bring this one here, right high, and we're going to add another value right here. So we're literally going to make this one up. And as we have the high, we're also going to have the low right here. And there we go. All right, so far so good. Now let's duplicate the layer one more time. We're going to add a value which is going to be 7 days. And let's make this one regular. And let's add a rectangle around it. Let's bring it down. All right, so far so good. And we're going to add a radius around this. All right, it's looking good so far. So let's go ahead over here, nucleo icons. We're going to add a narrow icon, and we're probably going to go with something around these lines. And let's bring it over here. All right, so far so good. Now let's start adding a little bit of color into the mix. So we're going to go with something around these lines, maybe not too intense for this specific version. And let's go over here, change the green. Maybe we're going to go with a tint around these lines. We can always change these things on the go, by the way, so it's not like we're necessarily forced to use that specific tint that we selected in the early stages. So always keep that in mind. especially in the first part of the projects. All right, so far so good. Let's make this one a little bit less bold. And I think this is looking good so far. So now we're actually going to tackle the top menu, since we're still missing that element. So let's go ahead over here and let's add a arrow icon also here on the top. And we're going to add a hamburger menu on the top right. And here we go. All right, so far so good. And what we're gonna do in this case is actually, I think that I'm just going to duplicate this and change the orientation, increase the size just to maintain the visual consistency between the icons. And there we go. So let's go ahead over here and let's just bring this one on the left. And what we're gonna do next is we're going to actually create the handlebars below. So let's just do that. I'm going to create a rectangle. And over here we're going to have the first bar. Let's just change the fill to this color. And we're also going to increase the radius so it goes and covers the full width. And talking about width, we're going to make these maybe 1.5. And let's create a duplicate of this. And now let's zoom in so we can see better what we're doing. We're going to create the very first candle section. And let's just go ahead and duplicate these guys a few times. Let's do one. And I'm actually wondering if the spacing is good. Actually, before we do that, let's just group together all of this. Let's go ahead and edit. Let's create these bars. And right after, we're going to actually change the dimensions of these and everything which is correlated with these bars right here. All right, so far so good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to equally distance them from one another. We're going to like start modifying the height and the width of each and every one of them individually. And actually I think I'm going to add just a few more in the mix, so we have some more variety going on. And there we go. All right, so far so good. Let's bring this one here. Let's make this one smaller. And so essentially what we're going to do is to modify them individually and just figure out a way to make them all look good in the entire composition. Let's go over here, let's increase this and let's bring this one up. Make this one bigger as well. And let's go ahead and increase this one. Bring this one right here, and this one's going to be smaller. So let's go ahead. Let's just create these different variations of these bars. And so far so good. I I think we're heading in the right direction now. And then we're going to essentially change also the color and create some consistency in between. All right, so far so good. We want like a bit of more variation here when it comes to the height of the bar. So maybe doing something around these lines could actually help us. Maybe this one is going to be bigger, and this one as well. So let's go ahead over here, and overall this is looking pretty fine. And let's go ahead and let's remove the last two. I'm going to bring this one here, and I'm going to copy this just a few times. Let's make it smaller. We're going to add some values over here. This one is going to be 0, 7, 0, and let's go ahead and let's duplicate this just a few times. Actually, let's bring these guys even more near to each other. Yep, that will do. And now let's go ahead and create the different values. All right. This one's going to be 60. This one's going to be 50. Let's move on to 40, 30, and 20. All right, so far so good. Now what we want to change is essentially the color in some of these. So let's make these ones red. Select, and I'm basically using the deep select, which is using Shift plus Command, and there we go. Actually, I think I selected just a different tint. Okay. All right, we got our bars, and what we're gonna do next is we're going to add some element regarding the time. So, all right, let's make this one here, and let's distribute vertically. All right, so far so good. Change the time over here. This was going to be 50, 16, and so on. All right, so far so good. And we could potentially also add some other elements, but I think that so far we're doing pretty well with this candle graph. And the very next thing that I'm gonna try just before we leave this candle graph is to actually make it bigger. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to bring these elements more near to each other, and bring this one also down just a bit, and let's just resize these guys. All right, this is looking pretty interesting. So let's move on to the very next part of this app, which is going to be essentially a section. Actually, let's duplicate this one, which is going to be the let's call it just call it overview. All right, basically in this section we're going to have a few elements So let's move on. All right, so far so good. This one's going to be right align, so that's going to be easier to actually edit these values, which we're gonna do in just a moment. And let's go ahead, let's increase the size. Maybe let's increase it one more time. And let's make this one regular. All right, so far so good. So at this point we're just going to add a few different rows of these. And basically, oops. Actually, what I can do is just duplicate them a few more times. I'm actually wondering if it would be beneficial then to have like some buttons below. So yeah, let's just do that. I'm going to go overhead here, use the vertical distribution tool, and I'm probably going to just go ahead and create some other number variations, and I'm going to do it manually the good old-fashioned way, simply because I'm not in the mood to messing around with some plugins. So let's do that, and let's go over here. Let's change these values up. So as you can see, for the very most part, it's just all about doing experiments and trying different things. Whenever I'm working on new client projects, I'm always just trying different things out, and you never know really what is going to work, what isn't going to work. So always keep an eye on just trying different things. And then eventually, especially if you have a bunch of different elements, you're going to see some patterns, and eventually you're going to find the direction that you want to go towards to. So it's just a matter of trying, testing, and yeah, that's pretty much how it is. And that's the beauty also of our job. We're creative individuals, so always want to try different things. All right, I'm about to finish this. And pretty much set with the last one. Okay, so far so good. Actually, let me just group this, center it, just to be sure that we're on the right track. And there we go. So the very last thing that we're gonna do, well, apart from actually making this one 1.5, we're actually going to duplicate this and we're going to bring this to the bottom, make the buttons a little bit bigger. We're going to create two different call to actions. Very first one is going to be buy, and the very second one is going to be in the sell option. So the first one is going to have this fill, and we're going to do it directly here. So let's go ahead, let's select this, and let's just increase the size of this text. Let's make it semi-bold, and the second option is going to be to sell. Actually, I wanted to make these bigger in width all in one go, but I think I'm going to do it the good old-fashioned way. So center this. Let's center this one as well. This one's going to be cell. And let's try maybe not too sure about these buttons. Maybe they look okay, I guess, but I'm not really too fond of them. Some reason. Also, this entire section, I think it's not really aligned. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to center this. Ideally, what you want to do is to use a layout grid. I just didn't want to do it in this scenario because I wanted to freestyle with this specific design. But again, guys, if you're working on client projects, always want to use the layout grids from the get-go, or at least from the very first screen, so that you're essentially going to be covered for the structure and all of the upcoming screens, really. Right, so I'm going to duplicate all this, and I'm going to try, before we go into the dark mode, I'm going to try and just change the opacity of this to 10% and invert the buttons. And probably we're just going to stick with the first option, but let's go ahead and let's duplicate all this. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm essentially going to select all of the text layers, text. I'm going to select all of these guys. Oops. And for some reason I can't seem to select the shift key is not working. Okay, I guess we're going to simply select them one by one. Not a big deal, especially if you guys are into FPS. You're used to doing a lot of clicking. I'm sure there is a better way. I just can figure out the shortcut. Maybe I'm too used to Figma and Sketch now, and I forgot the shortcut to select all in one go. I'm sure it's going to come to mind immediately after the video. Usually that's the way it goes, but no biggie. For this time we're just going to do some manual work. Took less than a minute, so it's all good. And let's go ahead over here, and we're going to change the color, of course. Maybe let's try this one here, and we could go with a tinted version, and I think that that's exactly what we're gonna do. Maybe you could potentially also keep the green ones. I think that this works. This will work just fine. So let's go. Oops. And let's go and select the red. And there we go. All right. So hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.